Hello and welcome to Pastor's Perspective, sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. My name is Brian Perez, and with us today to answer your questions until 4 p.m. Pacific time are Brian and Cheryl Broderson from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. We would love to chat with you, so give us a call, won't you please, at 888-564-6173. 888-564-6173. You can also send in your questions on Facebook Messenger and on Instagram, or by filling out the form on the Pastor's Perspective page of our flagship radio station's website, KWAVE.com, KWAVE.com. But the best way to get an answer is to get in line, grab a line, a phone line, and wait your turn, I guess you could say. 888-564-6173 is the number to call. So how you guys doing?
We haven't seen each other today. I'm doing well.
Yes, and I'm doing great too.
As we've said in the past, this is usually the place where you guys see each other for sometimes days go by, and you guys are like, oh, hey.
That's right.
It was good to see you again.
Yes. Thank you. Good to see you. Yes, good day. I had a good catch-up time. Greg, Lori, and I spent some time having coffee this morning. You know, we do this a few times a year, but...
Oh, cool.
So this was our catch-up before the end of the year, which was nice. I came home and did something Cheryl doesn't know. I took a run.
Oh.
And that was great.
I was hoping you'd say, I put the wreaths up on the windows, something Cheryl doesn't know, but she'll be so excited about as soon as she comes home. But
No. And then
you probably didn't take Barnabas with you either.
No, I did not.
Okay.
No.
Never mind.
And then... And then I did a couple of other things, a couple of good deeds around the church. I helped
Spark of Life?
I helped solve the problem of the snow blowing machine for tonight. Oh. Yes, there was
it's tonight too.
Yes,
I thought it wasn't till the carols tonight.
No, it's a school.
Oh, it is.
School, yeah. So my big contribution was giving permission for the snow blower machine to go on the roof.
So what I did is I went and picked up some really fun gifts for Spark of Love.
Oh,
because I've been like, I've got to get my Spark of Love present. So I went and I thought, what do I want? And I chose the ones that I would like. So I got Elsa and Anna, two dolls with tea sets. And then I thought, and if I was a boy, so I got some race sets with Matchbox. I tried to get things that don't need batteries. Because just in case,
Good idea. What is Spark of Love, Brian Perez?
Spark of Love is a toy drive that we do every year here in Southern California with the Orange County Fire Authority. Yep. We've been doing it for 4 years now. They've been doing it for 31 years altogether. Yeah. And we've partnered with them for the past 4 years. Yeah. And we did a couple of... appearances, you could say, at some Walmarts earlier in the last few weeks. Yeah, I was at the one in Foothill Ranch last week, and 3 weeks ago. Where was the one 3 weeks ago? Oh, San Clemente, of course. And we were also in Buena Park. And I put out a challenge to people who weren't sure, well, how many gifts should I get? Should I just get one? So I said, well, if you've got kids, how many kids do you have?
That's what I did.
You can do 4 kids. Or how many grandkids do you have? Or how many great-grandkids do you have? So, we had one guy show up with 36 toys. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. But in my mind, he did. Yeah. Somebody did. Because
we have 6 kids, so I got 6 toys. And that was so
6 grandkids.
6 grandkids. Yes. Yeah, that's right. 4 kids.
Yes.
4 children.
And what a blessing to be able to partner.
You know what I saw in the church? Somebody bought a bike.
A bike.
And it looked really nice. A really nice, shiny blue bike. And thought, yay, that's so generous, so kind.
Yeah.
But, when we were in Vista, our church used to love to do this too. Mm-hmm. And I know that they're going to be, is it this afternoon that they're coming to pick them up, or this evening?
I think. Well, it's today. I forget if it's exactly. Yeah, but we were over at the Honda Center, I think. And
yes. Yeah. Exciting.
All right, 888-564-6173, and it is the season for questions about Christmas and things of that nature. So here's one. What is the significance of the gold, frankincense, and myrrh that were brought to Jesus when he was little?
Can we just say, first of all, nobody knows for certain, but they were the spices that you would bring to a king. I mean, they were expensive, so they're expensive gifts. They probably were, what do I want to say? They probably found their origin where they came from. Because usually, like when the Queen of the South, the Queen of Sheba, came to see Solomon, she brought all the spices that were native to her country. So probably the resin of myrrh and frankincense were probably something that where they came from in the East was a specialty. And then the gold was probably just something that, they're coming to honor a king. There are those who put a lot of significance in the fact that these were, frankincense and myrrh were embalming spices often. And so they say that, this was foreshadowing his death. Sorry about that. That it was foreshadowing his death, which, definitely could be a factor in that, So,
Yeah. Brian, anything to add?
No. I mean, again, there are those speculations about what it might have been foreshadowing. I think they're fine. They are just speculations, so we don't know for sure. And some have even speculated that it appears from the record that Joseph might have died while Jesus was even not a boy maybe, but a young man. And so some have thought that these would have been Mary's provision, for the rest of her life. And we don't really know.
But
but they're coming for a king.
Right. And it's interesting to note, too, exactly. Here's this baby in Bethlehem who's, not famous, not known, and they've got these expensive treasures to give to him. Interesting, frankincense and myrrh were both spices that were used in the holy anointing oil, the oil that no one was allowed to copy. That was the anointing for the tabernacle. So that's of note, too. I know I've been on sites because I went to look it up before, and, you can find all sorts of things, but it's pretty speculative.
Cool deal. Okay, 888-564-6173. And here's a question that was sent in on Facebook. And this one was sent in for Cheryl. It's from Benny. And Benny writes, I would like to ask Cheryl for her perspective or advice since she's a mom and a wife. I've written to this program before and shared that my wife of 23 years passed away.
Oh.
The tragic thing is that she went home to be with the Lord on my daughter's 21st birthday.
Oh, that's hard.
Besides praying and giving a time, how am I going to counsel my daughter? She's 25 this year, and she doesn't want to celebrate her birthday. Another question I have is that I've met someone. We're currently going through pre-marriage counseling with a church. My daughter is okay with her, but when it comes to marriage, she's uncomfortable with that. I have planned to get married next August, and many will ask me what's going to happen to my daughter as she has been living with me all this time. And I do worry of the idea of her staying by herself. I plan to perhaps visit with her a few days regularly when I get married. But what's your perspective? Benny wants to know.
That's so personal. I think that's one of those Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not to your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he'll direct your paths. Benny, I couldn't even begin to tell you what to do or that, except for to maybe make an extra effort just to assure your daughter of how much you love her. Obviously now she's got competition, and that's this girlfriend who your attention is centered on. And so I think that your daughter needs to know she's still important to you, that you will love her. I would probably make a weekly date with your daughter, even though she's living with you, just to say, you know what, for the rest of our lives, every, Thursday afternoon or Wednesday evening or whenever you can, let's go out to dinner. Just make that so that's something that you're going to have for the rest of your lives together. Keep the communication open. But really let her know that you love her. Fathers are so important to daughters. Strategically, I know that I feel like Brian's role in my daughter's life was even more important than my role, because I was the one who was always telling them to dress modestly. And Brian was the one who just got to say, I love you so much. You're so beautiful. In fact, one time, one of my daughters was wearing a totally inappropriate T-shirt. And I was just going on and on and on about it. And she went in and she said to her father, Mom doesn't like this. And he said, yeah, it's terrible. And she's like, oh, okay, thank you. That was it. Like me, it was like, please don't wear that. Ah. And Brian goes in and she's like, okay, thank you, Dad. Like Father has spoken. But I think to reassure your daughter of your love for her, and maybe just talk about the future. Let her know this is inevitable. I need this person in my life. I'm in love. It's going to happen. But how can I make you feel included? How can you know that I always love you? Those kind of things are important.
I wonder too, and not exactly on that same aspect of the question, but I think with her birthday, for example.
Yeah.
If somehow through prayer and maybe conversation, if she could begin to shift and see that her mother's, the Bible says precious in the sight of the Lord is the death of his saints. So for her mother, this was a glorious day of, talk about a birthday. This is, being birthed into the kingdom forever. And of course, in the moment, that's going to be difficult to grasp. But now, a few years on, you start to look and see it from a different perspective. Like, yes, this is a devastating day, but yet it was the day that my mom, entered into the fullness
this corruption put on incorruption.
Of what God has. So, maybe, Benny, that would just be something to pray about and think about how you might help with that. And then, maybe there's just a good book that she could on heaven. Sometimes we tend to
Randy
feel
Alcorn's book
on heaven. Yeah, Laurie wrote one. Mm-hmm. And I think, sometimes we miss out on the reality that because we're so grief-stricken, we forget that the person who's gone is not that.
Right.
They're not going,
right.
Oh, darn, I had to die and come to heaven,
Mm-hmm.
They're in glory.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe that could point her a little bit in that direction.
All right, Benny, thank you for writing in your question on Facebook Messenger. And we're going to do one more from Facebook. This is actually a 2-for-1. Don wrote in and says, Moses had to hide his face from the presence of God. The Bible says that no one alive will see the face of God. Does this mean that when we get to heaven, we will see his face? Because we're no longer alive on earth. We're no longer human. So will we be able to see the face of God?
Well, first of all, Moses didn't hide his face from the presence of God. Moses hid his face from the people because of the glory that was shining on his face. He put a veil over his face.
Yeah, but then when he was in the presence of the Lord, he was hidden in the cleft of the rock.
But when he was in the presence of the Lord, he removed the veil.
Right.
So it specifically says that. So no one can see, when it says no one can see God, there's a little bit of confusion because there's actually a place in Exodus where it says that the elders, Moses, Aaron, and the elders of Israel saw the Lord. Mm-hmm. And so what does that mean?
Well, isn't it that they saw the throne, the crystal, like what surrounded him too, kind of like heaven was open to them.
Yeah. So what the Bible is expressing when it uses that language, no one can see me and live, is God in his glory. No one can survive a glance at the glory. And so God veils himself. God
humbles himself.
He puts himself in a place where he doesn't, he dwells in unapproachable light, Paul said, but he has made himself accessible in ways historically, and ultimately that's through the person of Jesus. His glory is veiled in his flesh. So when it says that no one can see God, it means that in this present state, we cannot behold God in the totality of his glory, but we will see him face to face in the future.
And don't you think, too, part of that is that if we could see God as he really is, it would be so intimidating. I'm thinking about when we saw the Lou Giglio movie when it was talking about Betelgeuse, and it was, this planet that is so humongous, and it was talking about the, our cells, and how they're T-shaped, and these incredible, or the binding is T-shaped that holds them together, and how the cross is here and there, and just the glory of how small we, I don't want to say glory, but the realization of how small we are and how great God is. It was unsettling, to say the least. And I think about how that, when you're, I was just with a little girl, Eve, who's so cute. But in order to get Eve to be willing to come to me, I made myself as small as possible. You're like, hi, and you make yourself small. And when you see a child, you usually get down and you make yourself small so you're not intimidating, so they're not scared of you. The same thing as if you want to feed a squirrel, or if you want to feed a bunny, or, that's in the wild, you make yourself as small so they're not intimidated, so they're not scared of you. And God is so great that were we to see him in our glory, we would pass out. I mean, you think about Daniel, who's in the presence of the Lord, and he doesn't see him at first, but he feels the presence and he faints dead away. And how many times we read that in Scripture when people are confronted with God, or even the presence of God, they fall, and they faint. And Daniel said, and I had no strength remaining in me. And so I think what we're talking about, that, yes, in the glorified state, we cannot in these bodies live and see God. It's too glorious. Plus, we're not righteous. He's altogether righteous. So we'd be slain probably even because of, the iota of sin that we might carry.
Well, like Isaiah, I am
man of unclean.
I'm a man of unclean lips. Yeah.
But there is a time, yes, when we will be changed. And when we are changed and we get our glorified bodies, then we shall behold him, and we will see him as he is.
Yes.
Which is we shall see him as he is. Is that 1 John?
1 John.
1 John.
Yeah.
Okay, and here's Don's other question regarding Romans 1:28, which reads, even as they did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a debased mind to do those things which are not fitting. Don wants to know, can you explain this verse? Is it saying that we know what God wants, but we refuse to listen to him?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the whole passage beginning in verse 18 is talking about the wrath of God that's being poured out upon all ungodliness and unrighteousness of people who hold the truth or actually who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So suppressing the truth means I know what's true, but I'm going to hold it down so I don't have to be obligated to it. So that's exactly what's happening, yes.
Don, thank you for sending in your questions on Facebook Messenger. And now we're going to go to the phones at 88.
1 John 3:2. Beloved, now we are the children of God, and it has not yet been revealed what we shall be, but we know that when he is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. So,
it's in the Bible.
There you go. 1 John 3:2. I'm sure there's others, but that one comes to mind.
888-564-6173 is our number, and let's begin our time on the phones with Liz in Laguna. Welcome to the program, Liz. How can we help you?
Hi, I'm so blessed to have caught you guys all at the same time. My goodness. I have a couple of questions for you, but if I could just share something just quick before I ask my question, or is that okay?
Yeah.
So I wanted to share that when my dad, this was like 10 years ago, and my dad went through an illness, and he was in several hospitals. He was older, and so he ended up at one nursing home, I believe in Huntington Beach, and so I was going through my turmoil because every time they changed hospitals, there was a lot more to deal with. And then I heard a beautiful, beautiful song in the background. And I was like, my goodness, what is that? And it was a hymn. And who do you suppose was on the guitar singing that?
Not my son, Char.
No, it was your dad.
Oh, my dad.
I was so blessed. I was just like, oh, my gosh. Like, I never knew that he did that. And that's kind of one of those things that he did, privately. But it was such a blessing, and these people were so happy. So I wanted to share that with you.
Great.
Well,
Our son made an album of hymns.
Oh, wow.
And his name is, Char. But my dad did a song. I know he did a hymn. He didn't do hymns except for how he did. What is it? If we would ink the ocean fill and we're the sky of parchment made.
Love of God.
Yeah, the love of God. He did an album called The Love of God, but that's the only one I know of, except for a couple of Maranatha albums that he sang on. But that's great.
And he wasn't the one playing the guitar.
No, he's never, to my knowledge, he didn't do anything with guitars.
Could have been like Dennis Agajanian.
Maybe Dennis Agajanian.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
That was just the coolest thing ever. So I wanted to share that. But my question was, do you know of any resources for pastor's kids? I'm a pastor's kid, and I've known a lot of pastor's kids, and it seems like even, mainstream music or what have you, there's a lot of people that, end up popping up here and there, and they're like pastor's kids, and you're like thinking, wow, I wonder what happened in that life.
Yeah.
But that being the case, we all come into our own at our own time. Like I literally came out of the womb and bam, I was like a pastor's kid. And it was a lot for me. I mean, the things you witness when you're a pastor's kid, you always have a ton of people at your house and, a lot of prayers, a lot of worship and things, which I absolutely am so thrilled that I was able to have that kind of life.
Mm-hmm.
But especially like in those days, there was a lot of confusion, because I wasn't like everybody else. And I didn't have anybody that I could say, oh, you're similar. And my best friend and I, my father was like the lead minister and her dad was the pastor while we were teenagers. And so we literally would sit in the back pew and bring as many entertaining things as we could because, we really didn't really have anything to do with the service.
So are you asking then if there are resources to help pastors' kids to stay on the straight and narrow instead of kind of wandering off the path?
Yeah, something, that they can relate with.
Okay. Can you guys think of anything?
I can't think of anything, and I'm obviously a pastor's kid too. In fact, I like to joke that I'm a pastor's kid, I'm a pastor's niece, I'm a pastor's cousin, I'm a pastor's sister, I'm a pastor's mother, and I am the mother-in-law of a pastor. But I can...
And you're a pastor's wife.
And I'm a pastor's wife. I forgot about that one. But the most obvious one, right? But I've often been approached with people, especially back when I was younger, if I would have a retreat for pastors' kids, because you're right, it is a very unique position, unlike other people, because of the pressure, because of the fishbowl. But personally for me, I felt the Lord speak to me and say, Cheryl, it's either an opportunity or a curse. It's your choice. If you choose to walk with me, it can be an opportunity to be an example to others, because my dad had it's a pretty substantial church. So I was always watched, always on. I got a lot of criticism. I got a lot of people talking behind my back, a lot of gossip about me, a lot of rumors going around. And sometimes I would hear them and go, oh my goodness. But, and then also I saw the dark side of a lot of things because, you do see the dark side of people as well as the best of people. So for me personally, it was, I felt like the Lord said, what do you want? And I said, I want to use this as an opportunity. And I just always chose to walk with the Lord. But I would be with other pastors' kids, and I'd be like, they'd they think that I was like them and that I was into, rebellion or doing secret sins. And I was like, I'm not into any of that stuff. I actually really, really love Jesus and want to walk with Jesus. So for me, it was a little different. The best thing that I ever found as far as kind of broaching the subject, which doesn't broach it at all, but was a book by Jill St. John. And it was about, it's her, Jill St. John tells her story. And it was just really the beginning is that her father was a missionary in South America. And so she and her siblings only got to see her father just a short time every year. And they went to a small church where they were the only children and they were known by everybody. But that their mother made it sound like such a privilege to be able to give their father to the ministry, and the way that she presented to them their lives, and the way she made the Lord so exciting and service for the Lord such a blessing, and they didn't have much money, really inspired me that to be a pastor's child, even though it has its fishbowl existence, is really it's not Jill St. John. She's an actress. It's Patricia St. John tells her story. Patricia St. John. Thank you so much. Just saw that you have Jill St. John.
I'm like, all I can find is the Jill St. John cookbook, so I don't know who.
My bad. Patricia St. John. So she actually lived in like the. I think she was born in like the late 1800s too. So it's a really old book, but it's excellent. In fact, she wrote a lot of books for children too, Patricia St. John. But that was the book that ministered to me the most. I really don't have much that I can give you, except for I think that pastors' kids need a lot of extra love and a lot of extra grace because of all those things. So
I listened to a 2-part podcast, the Stetzer Church Leaders podcast.
Oh, did they have something for pastors' kids?
Yeah, because Matt Chandler just wrote a book along with Adam Griffin, and the title is Family Discipleship, Leading Your Home Through Time, Moments, and Milestones. And so they were talking about this new book that Matt's just written, and maybe that would be something to consider. I'm sure there's plenty of books out there people have written on that.
Yeah, but not so much about, because, that's kind of my specialty, not so much about being a pastor's kid that was relatable. I think there's some, but it's hard because every denomination will be a little different too. Like the Baptist experience was, I think, quite a bit different than, the Calvary experience, which is, Pentecostal experience. Yeah.
Or the Lutheran, the Presbyterian.
Right. Yeah. I think all of those are, because when I was in public school, I was always seeking out friends, especially with the pastors' kids. And I remember the Lutheran kids, they were doing some bad stuff. I'll just say it. And I was just like, should
have seen the Catholic kids.
Well,
but their dads weren't the pastors.
No, their dads were not the priests, unless that would be really scandalous and explain everything, wouldn't it? Like the Medicis, right?
Liz, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Is this the book you just mentioned, Brian, or is it a forthcoming book? That's it. Okay, it's called Family Discipleship. It's by Matt Chandler and Adam Griffin. So check that out. Might be a good resource. And earlier we mentioned a couple of other books, but I forgot to repeat them just in case you wanted to go look for them. Heaven by Randy Alcorn, and also Pastor Greg Laurie's book, Hope for Hurting Hearts. Those might be good books that you can get on those topics. By the way, this weekend is Greg's birthday. Did you bring that up at coffee today? Is that why you went to coffee today?
Yeah, we had a birthday cake, and I got him a little hat, candle. No, of course not. But yes, because Greg and I both have birthdays in December, we kind of know, each other's. Yeah, so he's born December 10th, and of course I am December 31st. So. Yeah,
I'll never forget that time we went to a restaurant. That guy shouted out, "Brian, didn't your mother have something better to do on New Year's Eve?"
Apparently not. What's better than bringing me into the world?
Absolutely.
That's how my mom
thankful.
feels about it.
Yes.
Of course.
888-564-6173 is our number. We're going to be here for another 30 minutes. Give us a call if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube. Thank you. Call us if you've got a question. The number's right there on the bottom of your screen. For you guys listening on the radio who don't have a screen, the number is 888-564-6173, 888-564-6173. On Pastor's Perspective. Give us a call. We're here for about 25 more minutes at 888-564-6173. My name is Brian Perez, and we've got Brian and Cheryl Broderson from Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa here to answer your questions. 888-564-6173. Look at that. If you're watching on Facebook and YouTube, they're making eyes at each other. And
well,
everything.
You know what? I'm thinking as soon as this is over, we've got to get a bite to eat because we have to come back because we have to watch one of the most adorable 3-year-olds in the world sing, and I think he's going to be singing Jingle Bells, but he couldn't remember. But he thinks so.
I hope he remembers tonight.
Oh, he will. He loves to sing, and he's really good at it, and so we're really looking forward to that. And we had to go. I went with his mom yesterday to find him a sweater to wear, and he wanted one with a train on it, and we did not find a sweater with a train, and he was very disappointed because he's got one. Unfortunately, it's a 2T, and it doesn't fit him because he's 3, almost 4, and so he was very disappointed. He wanted his mom just to make it work, and she couldn't. So we had to shop for
His
something.
little 3-year-old brain just couldn't figure that
He
out.
does not like moving on with anything. And he lost his little French bulldog a couple of weeks ago to epilepsy, to a grand mal. And he's still not over that. It's just hard.
All right, 888-564-6173. And it is Advent season here at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa this Sunday. Part 2 of the message, or part 2 in the series called The Story of God. Who's teaching it this weekend?
Char. Our son, Char Broderson. His name is actually Brian Charles Broderson. So he's named after Brian, his father, and Charles after my father, Chuck Smith, whose name was actually Charles. Charles Ward Smith was my father. And so I said I named him after the 2 men I loved most in the world. And then...
So sweet.
Yes.
And the title
Yes, here we go.
The message this Sunday. The story of God is the overarching theme, and the story unravels. So last week we looked at the beginning, we looked at creation, and now we will look at the fall. So Genesis chapter 3.
Okay, this Sunday, 8:30 in the morning and 11 in the morning. If you can't be here in person, though we would love to see you here, you can watch live online at live.cccm.com or listen here on the radio. We carry the 11 a.m. service on our flagship station, KWVE-FM, as well as our sister station, KSDW. To the phones, 888-564-6173. Lorna, listening in California. How can we help you, Lorna?
Hi. My question is directed to Cheryl.
You sound far away. Are you on speakerphone or Bluetooth or something?
Are you hearing me better now?
Not much. You just sound very distant.
I'm in the car, so maybe that's why.
Oh, it could be because you're far, far away from us. But I see the question here on the screen. Lorna wants to know if your dad had the same relationship with your siblings that he had with you, and how was your relationship with your mom?
Well, first of all, I'm quite a distance away from my other siblings. So my sister was 11 and my brothers were 9 and 7 when I was born. So they were already in school. So when I checked like is it Smalley that has that book on the birth order book? It was as if I was an only child. So if
Lehman?
there's...
Is it Lehman?
Maybe. Kevin Lehman?
Yes.
Yeah, Kevin Lehman. So if you have more than 6 years, it's like you're an only child. So they're all in school, and I had my parents to myself. And then by the time that I was, in elementary, they're in, one's graduated, the others are in high school and, about to graduate. So they were all out of the house, and I was the only person living at home by the time I was 11 and 12 years old. So it was different in that respect. I know that my father loved us all equally, but I was hyperactive. So I probably spent a majority of the time, when they had 3, it's a lot of management. When you have 3 really close together, it's a lot of management. But when you have just one child to yourself, you're able to manage that child just a little bit easier. So I think that was part of it. And then I was hyperactive. So my mom would send me off with my dad quite a bit. So I did house calls. In those days, pastors used to do house calls, which you don't do so much anymore. But we would go and we would visit different people in the church. And my dad would always take me to the ones who would always give him a cookie. So we would visit the cookie-making people in the church, which I just loved, especially this one lady. She made the best cookies. And she always just had them waiting for my father and I. And my dad also had some rentals that actually belonged to my grandma. And we would go and we would collect the rent from the rentals. I would just do all those things with him that I could, and it would give my mom a little bit of a break from a toddler and a young child. And then I think that's, my relationship with my mom was nurturing, but she was very perfectionistic. My mom was adopted, so she was very, she always felt like she was being judged, and that she always had to do her very, very best. So being a perfectionist with a young, hyperactive daughter was not an easy mix, but I think she did admirably, considering all that she had to put up with. So I remember my parents used to pick me up early on Tuesdays, which was my dad's day off, and they would pick me up early from school, and I would go on long drives with them, and I actually just really enjoyed them. My mom, because she was adopted and because the others were management, she tended to be very, very protective of me. I think I mentioned on this program before, a woman had grabbed me when I was 4 years old at the church and spanked me. And it so upset my mom that she wouldn't let me out of her sight after that. And she was very, very protective. I wasn't allowed to spend the night at anybody's house till I was in junior high. Actually high school, I think it was, before she felt comfortable even letting me spend the night at someone's house. because of her upbringing, because of what had happened to me. So I really appreciate the fact that she watched over me. She prayed for me every day before I would leave for school. She made sure I was prayed over, and I never left the house without her praying over me or saying, "You're a lamb among wolves." Especially, she wanted me to know that it was not safe out there and that I was to behave myself as a good little lamb, which I did. Somehow that really helped me out, going out into the big wide world to be careful. So, yes, I adored my dad. He was my hero. In fact, before I met Brian, I told my dad, "How can I ever get married? I'll never love anyone as much as I love you." And when I fell in love with Brian, he said, "What's going on? You said you'd never love anybody as much as you love me." I said, "Until I met you again in Brian form." And, what can I say, Dad? It's all the qualities that I love in you I find in Brian. Same is true today. So an integrity for God's word, kindness, which my dad was just full of kindness. The one thing that Brian does not do is my dad liked to repair things. Like he put in a garage door for us that opened 3/4 of the way. My mom used to hide things so my dad wouldn't try to fix them because he loved to fix things. Whether he could fix them or not is TBD.
See, and I learned from watching him, you don't want to do that. So let's just hire somebody.
He put in a retaining wall for us that was actually not meant to be curved, but it kept curving. It looked it was, bless him. It was so sweet. He had the best heart and the best intention.
And he did a few. He built the playhouse for the kids.
That was fantastic.
That turned out really
That
nice.
was amazing.
Yeah, he had some wins.
Yeah, he did. He did have some wins.
The garage door, he never could get the garage door right, though.
He would come home and come to our house and he would work on it again. But he was amazing. He was an amazing grandfather. My kids all absolutely adored him. My mom and dad would play with the kids, and my mom would be, I can't remember, I think her name was Prunella, and my dad's name was Robard, and they were two kids in school, and they would pretend that Char and Kelsey, our two youngest, were their teachers. Braden, that's right. But with the other two, they would, have the other two come up and spend the night. And in fact, I was at South Coast Plaza the other day, and I was telling Kelsey, my mom actually fell down the escalator outside of Macy's when she was with my two children. They had taken them for a couple days because they would every once in a while. And my mom was at the top of the escalator ready to go down. She was holding 2 balloons and 2 Happy Meals. And Char, because he was happy and hyper, he jutted down. He just jumped on the escalator. And my mom reached to grab him and slipped and went face down the escalator. And Kristen was at the top of the escalator crying because she didn't know what to do because Grandma had just fallen down. And Char was at the bottom of the escalator feeling a lot of guilt. And a security guard came and helped Kristen down the escalator. And they were ready to call emergency services for my mom. And my mom said, "The only thing that's hurt on me is my pride." So my mom actually enjoyed stories like that because she was able to share them at her Joyful Life study. And everybody, of course, loved that study because she said there she was toppling down the escalator with 2 Happy Meals and 2 balloons. So, but they were great grandparents. I loved them as my parents. People will say, "What was it like to be Chuck's daughter?" I don't have a frame of reference to know what it would be like to be somebody else's daughter. I just know he was my dad and my mom. I one time said to him, "I don't know what it's like to be Chuck Smith's daughter, but I know what it's like to be your daughter." And he said, "Yep, I don't know what it's like to be Chuck Smith." In other words, he was very, Pastor Chuck Smith. Yeah, he was very real. And so that's all I can really share that I can know about it.
Yep. Lorna, thank you for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. Here's Richard in Menifee. Welcome to the program. Thanks for calling 888-564-6173. How can we help you?
Yes, thank you. I listen to you guys every morning on the way to work and also on the way home, so it's great. So my question was, my wife and I, we do Bible study, couples Bible study, and our group yesterday finished up the book of John. And then afterwards, we all started looking things up because, so apparently he's the last of the disciples to pass away and the only one to die, I believe, of natural causes.
Mm-hmm.
And so our question was, if that's the case, then that it put in between when he wrote the book of John and when he also wrote Revelations while he was exiled, that puts him right around the first part of the 2nd century, which would make him roughly, let's push it at, say, 150. So as we were all having our cake and coffee at the end, we're deciding, well, does that make him the second oldest person in the Bible next to Methuselah or not? Is there somebody else? And we were all sitting there trying to figure that out.
No, Abraham lived to be 175. So there's all kinds of, age ranges there between even Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Jacob lived to be 140. So, but John, most people believe that John lived to be about 90 years old, not more than 100 years old. I don't think there's anybody that believes John lived into the 2nd century. And so, and nobody really knows. There's speculation that this is because the Bible doesn't tell us. So there's no, some people believe the book of Revelation was written around 90 AD. Other people believe that it must have been written before the destruction of Jerusalem because there's no references to that in there, which, of course, that doesn't necessarily prove anything because the book is not about that topic, so it wouldn't necessarily cover it. But, yeah, nobody really knows. But most people think around 90.
Richard, thanks for your phone call. Now let's talk to Jason in Anaheim, California. Welcome to Pastor's Perspective, Jason.
Hey, everybody. Pastor Brian and Cheryl. Thanks for taking my call. I heard the gentleman call in about his daughter earlier, and I'm like, okay, this was a nudge to call in. So I've been wanting to call in for a while. So 13-year-old daughter, and I'm just trying to navigate it, honestly. I feel like I'm on a roller coaster, and I'm just holding on. And I just need your guys' perspective. How do I walk these years? How do I navigate these teenage years with grace, and also that tightrope of grace and also showing her, boundaries? Because sometimes I feel like, okay, I don't want to be too, having, so rule-ish that she's like, she'll rebel, but I also, want to show her grace. And I am not sure what to do.
What's your relationship with her like now? And how is she doing at 13 in her life in general? What's her spiritual life look like?
Good. So her spiritual life actually just took a really good turn for the better. She started going to Calvary Chapel schools.
Okay.
I would say that she's had a walk with the Lord before that, but it definitely increased this last few months. And I've been trying to encourage her to, continue that, even at home life and having devotions.
Yeah.
I try to carve out time every night to check in with her, to just be there, just to be present.
Yep.
But like this week, she came home and she was just flustered about a friendship. And I'm just like, God, how do I speak into her life? Because I don't know what to tell her. I'm trying to listen and be present.
Yeah.
But sometimes I just feel like I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And you've had a few daughters, right?
Yes. Yeah, I have too. And I don't know when they were 13, I don't know that I was doing the best job of fathering them in the area of sensitivity and things like that. I mean, I have an amazingly wonderful relationship with them now, and I have had for quite a few years with them both. But it just sounds, Jason, like you're just doing what you should do. You're loving her. You're listening to her. You don't always have to have an answer. You won't have an answer at times. Sometimes it's not so much having an answer. Sometimes it's just listening. It's just caring. It's just sympathizing. Sometimes it's just redirecting. But I think the two things that I think are massive, and I think both my daughters and my sons would say this, is just the fact that you love us, and we knew that you loved us, and you showed that love by being present. So when you say you're being present, that is a great thing. And then the other thing, Cheryl and I think, would both say, when you're raising your kids, you cannot pray enough for them. I mean, that is like, and I think both of us probably thought this. We just assumed, because we brought them up in the Lord, we brought them up in the faith. Of course, they're going to just, they might drift a little bit here and there, but, they're going to follow closely in the path that we've tread before them. They didn't necessarily do that. They kind of got off the path and got into their own stuff and got into some stuff that wasn't good and healthy. But it was the prayer that we look back nowadays. And it was the foundation of love, and it was the prayer on top of that ultimately, I believe, turned them around. And so, it sounds like you're doing fine. Just keep doing what you're doing.
I would add to that, though. Make sure they know you love them. You just say, honey, I love you. And I know that you don't understand why I'm doing this, but make sure that they know that you love them. One of the things, one of our daughters really walked away, and actually both of them had their times, but both of them were really brought back because they knew their dad loved them, especially our youngest child. She said, at one point, she's just like, I can't do this to my dad. I love my dad too much. And so that love really makes a difference. Just look up. And then something, too, is like my sister and I once talked about this, that every day our dad would tell us, you're beautiful, and I love you. And the fact, like we both would say, well, at least dad thinks I'm beautiful. That made such a difference, that there was somebody in this world that thought we were beautiful and of value. And so it really kept me from because boys have this way of being manipulative out there in the world, of, telling a girl she's really pretty, but you're not that pretty. There's other girls that are really pretty too. But knowing that your dad thinks you're absolutely beautiful, you're like, well, I can hold out then, because my dad thinks I'm really beautiful. And for me, if a boy said something like that was kind of manipulative, it was like, well, I can live with my parents for the rest of my life because I've got it pretty good. And so I think that just your daughter knowing that you love them, and then also if you could take her out to breakfast once a month, or take her out, that means so much to a girl to go out with her dad. Both my daughters remember going to, and they were like father-daughter luncheons, and they weren't that great. One was at Knott's Berry Farm, but that was a highlight of for them, just to go out alone with their dad.
Yeah, and now when we look at the pictures, they're like, oh gosh, can you believe we did that?
Yeah, but it's special. So, making memories, taking pictures.
Yeah, and I would just add one last thing, Jason, just, and you kind of touched on it, and I think this is right and good. Don't, be really careful with the rules, because, obviously we do have rules and we do have boundaries, but sometimes we can be excessive. One of the things that I think about, and sometimes my kids and I will joke about it, is just like some of the rules that I had. Like, why did I even have that rule? I don't know why I had that rule. It was the stupidest rule, but back then it meant, And I look back and I think, I wish I would have been a little more balanced,
I think we talked about it on the radio before about when Kristen wanted to wear those like Barbie high heels, open toes in the snow.
In the snow, yeah.
And sometimes consequential discipline is the best.
Yeah.
Live with that and see how you like it. Yeah.
And I didn't take, no, I was going to fight her to.
Yeah. Well, it's because you guys are so much alike too.
And now I look back and think, I should have just let your toes freeze. Who cares? They were your toes, not mine. So,
live and learn.
Yeah. And I think with the, just being with your spiritual life too, just being, authentic and being able to just, talk about the Lord and talk about what He means to you and what He's speaking to you and things like that in an unforced kind of a way, where it's not like you're preachy. You're just, this is who we are.
Jason, thanks for your phone call today on Pastor's Perspective. 888-564-6173 is our number. Brian and Cheryl Broderson here answering your questions. And here's one that was sent in online using the form on our flagship radio station's website, KWVE.com. Matthew wants to know, he says, I'm interested in getting your thoughts on being like-minded or of one mind, as in Romans 12:16 or Philippians 2:2. There's other verses that speak of being in one accord. There are so many views often on the same passage or topics like eschatology or gifts or Israel or the rapture. I often see lots of division over these differences, sadly. Wondering what your views are on this. Thank you in Christ for this ministry, Matt in Arizona. What do you tell Matt, Brian?
Well, I think, sorry.
That's okay.
Well, I think that...
What do you tell Matt, Cheryl?
Well, what I would tell Matt is, I agree. I mean, I think that we have to agree to disagree. I had a professor that said there are things that you differ on, but very few things that you should divide over unless it's doctrinal. And then there are things that we die for.
Major doctrinal stuff. Yeah. We have to learn. I think it's part of maturing. We have to learn that there are essential truths to orthodoxy that all Christians must hold to. Mm-hmm. And these things have to do with the nature of God. They have to do with the person of Jesus and the work of Jesus and the resurrection and all of those kinds of things. And then, some of them have to do with behavior. Some of them have to do more with anthropology, what God intended for humans and how we are supposed to live as Christians. So if somebody says, I believe as a Christian that I could live in adultery, and that's, I think that's an area where we don't need to divide over it. We can just agree to disagree and go on. No, that's not gonna, and I mean, that is the argument around same-sex relationships. A lot of people think, oh, well, you see it one way, I see it another. Let's just move on. No, there's certain things you just can't move on from. Mm-hmm. So, but other than that, Paul says to the Ephesians, when he's talking about the fact that there is one Lord, one faith, one baptism, one Spirit, and so forth, he says, endeavor to maintain the unity of the Spirit and the bond of peace. So we have to work at doing it. Naturally we're going to splinter. Naturally we're going to fragment. Naturally we're going to say, oh, they don't believe this, and therefore I'm going to ditch them and avoid them and tell people to stay away from them. Mm-hmm. And that is not the right.
And then they throw out the H word, heretic.
Heretic.
Yeah.
So we have to be very careful with there are some heretics out there, but we want to make sure that we're just not throwing that word around loosely. So, yeah.
Matt, thank you for writing in to us from Arizona. And thanks for listening today, all of you, all over the place, to Pastor's Perspective. We are done for this week. We'll be back live on Tuesday, so call us then with your questions. If we didn't get to your call today, call us first thing on Tuesday. We open up the lines about 7 minutes before 3 p.m. Pacific time. For Brian and Cheryl Broderson, I'm Brian Perez, and we invite you to Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa this Sunday for services at 8:30 a.m. and 11 a.m. or watch live online at live.cccm.com. Pastor's Perspective was sponsored by Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa.